Ram, Hare Hare. Jayom Vishnupad, Paramahamsa, Parivrajagacharya, Astacharya, Shrimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jayom Vishnupad, Paramahamsa, Parivrajagacharya, Astacharya, Shrimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki, Namacharya Swaya Haridas Thakur, Premsko Shri Krishna Chaitanya Guru Nityananda, Shri Veda Gadadhar, Shri Vasani Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki, Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath, Shyamakunda Radha Kunda, Giri Govardhan Ki, Vindam, Navali Maya Pudam Ki, Jagannath Puyadam Ki, Ganga Maya Ki, Yamuna Maya Ki, Tulasi Devi Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Samaveda Bhakta Binda Ki, Gaur Premanandi. Ah, glorious the assembled devotees. Oh, glorious the assembled devotees. Oh, glorious to the assembled devotees. Oh, glorious to Shishi Guru and Gauranga. I want to apologize for being late. Last week they scheduled me for Wednesday, so I didn't bother to look at the thing. I was going to look at it today and make sure that I was supposed to give class on Wednesday, but he changed me up. And I only slept 2.5 hours last night, so I chanted all my rounds before Mangal Arati, and then I took a nap and I set my alarm clock so for 7:54, so I would be here in time for class. I didn't know I was giving class, so I didn't hurry as much as I would have if I'd known. So apparently we're on 23, which is Canto 3, the status quo, Chapter 27, Understanding Material Nature, Text 23. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. If anyone has any of those like throat drops or something that they can give me one of, then my voice will sound better for the rest of the class. I didn't bring mine, unfortunately. Prakriti Purushasyeha Dayamana Tavar Harnisham Tiro Bhavitri Shanakaya Agner Yonir Evaranihi. Thank you. Prakriti Purushasyeha Dayamana Tvahar Nisham Tiro Bhavitri Shanakaya Agner Yoni Evaranai Prakriti Purushasyeha Dayamana Tvahar Nisham Tiro Bhavitri Shanakaya Agner Yoni Evaranai. Please chant. Prakriti Purushasyeha Dayamana Tvahar Nisham Agner Yoni Evaranai Prakriti Purushasyeha Ayamanatvaharnisham Yurabhavatri Shanakar Aunir Yoni Evavrani Prakriti Purushaseha Ayamanatvaharnisham Yurabhavatri Shanakar Agnir Yoni Evavrani. It is. Prakriti Purushaseha Ayamana Harnisham Yurabhavatri Shanakar Agnir Yoni Evavrani Prakriti Purushasyeha Taimana Vaharnisham Yurabhavatri Shanakar Agnir Yoni Evavrani Prakriti Purushasyeha Ayamanat Vaharnisham Yurabhavatri Shanakar Agnir Yoni Evavrani Prakriti, the influence of material nature. Purushasya, of the living entity. Iha, here. Dayamana, being consumed. To, but. Ahanisham, day and night. Tira bhavitri, disappearing. Shanakai, gradually. Agne, of fire. Yonihi, the cause of appearance. Iva, as. Aranihi, wooden sticks. Translation. The influence of material nature has covered the living entity, and thus it is as if the living entity were always in a blazing fire. But by the process of seriously discharging devotional service, this influence can be removed, just as wooden sticks which cause a fire are themselves consumed by it. Please repeat. The influence of material nature has covered the living entity, and therefore it is as if the living entity were always in a blazing fire. But by the process of seriously discharging devotional service, this influence can be removed. Just as wooden sticks which cause a fire are themselves consumed by it. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Fire is conserved in wooden sticks, and when circumstances are favorable, the fire is ignited. But the wooden sticks which are the cause of the fire are also consumed by the fire, if it is properly dealt with. Similarly, the living entity's conditional life and material existence is due to his desire to lord it over material nature, and due to his envy of the Supreme Lord. Thus, his main diseases are that he wants to be one with the Supreme Lord, or he wants to become the lord of material nature. The karmis try to utilize the resources of the material nature, and thus become its lord and enjoy sense gratification. And the gyanis, the salvationists, who become frustrated in enjoying the material resources, want to become one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or merge into His impersonal effulgence. These two diseases are due to material contamination. Material contamination can be consumed by devotional service, because in devotional service, these two diseases, namely the desire to lord over material nature and the desire to become one with the Supreme Lord, are absent. Therefore, the cause of material existence is at once consumed by the careful discharge of devotional service and Krishna consciousness. A devotee in full Krishna consciousness appears superficially to be a great karmi, always working, but the inner significance of the devotee's activities is that they are meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. This is called bhakti, or devotional service. Arjuna was apparently a fighter, but when by his fighting he satisfied the senses of Lord Krishna, he became a devotee. Since the devotee also engages in philosophical research to understand the Supreme Person as He is, his activities may thus appear like those of a mental speculator, but actually he is trying to understand the spiritual nature and transcendental activities. Thus, although the tendency for philosophical speculation exists, the material effects of fruitive activities and empirical speculation do not, because the activity is meant for the Supreme Personality of God. A lot of things to talk about. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasaya Buddhale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Bhacharini Nirvasesha Shunivadi Pastyatya Adishta Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyascha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Usually I hear the announcement of who's giving class after the Tulsi Puja, but when I don't sleep more than 3 hours, I skip Tulsi Puja, so I haven't studied elaborately for this class. So what I usually do is I go through the purport and talk a little bit about each part of it. But a couple of things occurred to me in the translation itself. It's described our situation as like we're in a blazing fire, and that is mentioned. We think about that every morning, actually, when we sing that Samsara Davana Lira Loka Chanaya Karunya Ganaganatam Baptasya Kalyana Gunarna Vasyam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vindam. So our situation is compared to a forest fire, Davanala. And the spiritual master, he's compared to a cloud, and he's got the filled with the water of Krishna's mercy, and he's putting out this fire. So actually, we meditate every day how we're in a fire, if we actually remember the meaning of the song. And the reference to arani is traditionally they would use these sticks, which they'd rub together to start the fires. Before they had matches and these various other things they used to start fires, lighters and stuff. So within earth, you have all the other elements. You have water, and you have fire, and you have air, and you have ether. So within the wood, there's already fire, and by rubbing it together, the fire comes out. There's a verse that talks about that actually in the second chapter. You probably know that verse. Is it Ryan who's memorized the second chapter in the Bhāgavatam? Remember the verse about the fire? Is it 23? Yeah. Could you recite it for the pleasure of the, of the Vaishnavas? Yeah, give the translation. Mm.
Actually, smoke is better than earth. Fire is better than smoke because you can use fire to make Vedic sacrifices. Maya. And it's saying that they're actually better than, and then it compares us to the modes of passion and ignorance. The mode of ignorance is like the earth element. The mode of passion is like the fire element. And the mode of goodness is better than all of them because it allows one to become transcendent and experience Brahman Darshan.
Yeah, it's a paraphrase. So it starts out, firewood is a transformation of earth, but smoke is better than raw wood. Fire is still better because by fire we can derive benefits of superior knowledge through Vedic sacrifices. Similarly, passion, rajas, is better than ignorance, tamas, but goodness, sattva, is best because by goodness one can come to realize the absolute truth. So this idea of fire coming from earth is present in that verse. So Prabhupada talks about how we have two diseases. One, we want to lord it over the material nature, and then when we're frustrated doing that, we want to become one with God. And that's the activity of the karmi, is lording it over material nature, and the activity of trying to become one with God is the activity of the jnani. So, but these two mistakes are annihilated by our practice of devotional service. Because devotional service actually begins with knowledge of our constitutional position. Lord Chaitanya said, Jivera Svirpoi Krishnera Nityadas, that our eternal constitutional position is to be an eternal servant of Krishna. So that understanding basically defeats both the notion of karma and jnana. The karmis are trying to, they're not trying to serve anyone, they're trying to be number one, whereas the devotee is practicing to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So instead of being the enjoyer of acting as if he's the enjoyer of sacrifices, he's performing sacrifices for the pleasure of the Supreme. The karmis have a saying, you got to look out for number one, meaning themselves. But we can also agree with that we have to look out for number one, meaning the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So basically, karmis are performing all kinds of sacrifices to please their own senses, whereas the devotees are performing all kinds of sacrifice to please the Supreme Lord, because they consider that they're part and parcel of the Lord, and that by pleasing the Lord, they will be happy. One of my favorite verses, actually in the Bhāgavatam, is a verse that has two analogies. Often in spiritual circles, like analogies are used to convey some message, but it's rare to find a verse that actually has two analogies in it. But there is a nice verse. Prabhupada quotes it in 9.3, purport of the Bhagavad Gita. Yatha toror mula nisechanena tripyanti tatskanda bujo pasaka prano parach chaitandriyanam tataiva sarvahanam achuteja. As pouring water on the root of the tree energizes the trunk, branches, twigs, and everything else, and is supplying food to the stomach, enlivens the senses and limbs of the body. Simply by worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service, one automatically satisfies the demigods who are parts of that Supreme Personality. And if the translation he gives, that's the translation he gives in the Bhāgavatam, that's 4:31:14 in the instructions of Narada Muni to the Prachetas. But actually in the Bhagavad Gita he gives a different translation, which means not only does performing devotional service satisfy all the demigods, but it actually satisfies everyone, because sarvahana means one worships everyone, actually by worshipping the Supreme, because everyone is actually part of the Supreme. So we actually can please everyone by worshipping the Supreme. The translation he gives in the Gita is by giving water to the root of the tree, one satisfies its branches, twigs, and leaves, and by supplying food to the stomach, one satisfies all the senses of the body. Similarly, by engaging in the transcendental service of the Supreme Lord, one automatically satisfies all the demigods and all other living entities, including oneself. There's a couple of nice verses about how the devotional service satisfies the self. Actually, they're in that second chapter, and we can engage Ryan in quoting them because he has a really taste for it. You want to say 1, 2, 6? No, that's 7. Which means?
Occupation, dharma for all humanity, that by which loving service in the Supreme Lord is gained. Such loving service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted in order to satisfy itself.
Yeah, so the karmis, they're identifying the self with the body, and they're thinking if they can satisfy the senses of their body, they'll satisfy their self. But they're actually wrong, because they're not their body. But the devotees, they understand that they're part and parcel of Krishna, and that by satisfying Krishna, they'll actually be happy, which is actually true. There's one devotee named Lakshminath from Montreal, and he was saying that when he was a new devotee, well, he was actually becoming a devotee. He'd been going to the programs and chanting and reading, and he decided he was going to move into the temple. And then, as Maya sometimes does, she was giving him all these reasons why not to move in the temple. So he decided, his mind was bubbling up with all these things, so he decided he would make a deal with his mind. He said to his mind, I've done whatever you told me to for the last 17 years. So for the next 17 years, I'm going to follow Krishna, and then I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to continue serving Krishna, or I'm going to go back to serving you. So he moved in the temple with that conviction, and he's a Prabhupada disciple, so he obviously lasted a lot more than 17 years. So he found that by serving his mind for 17 years, he didn't find the satisfaction that he was looking for, but by serving Krishna for the next 17 years, he was so satisfied that he didn't even consider about going back to being the obedient servant of his uncontrolled mind. So the other verse that talks about how the soul is satisfied in that chapter is 1:22. Without looking, can you remember that one? 1:22. Oh, you don't remember the numbers. Those are the only things I remember. Adavaya kaviyo nityam bhaktim paramaya muda vasudevya bhagavati kurvat yatma prasadanim. You want to say that one? The interesting thing about that verse, many, many times Srila Prabhupada quotes actually 5 verses from the Shrimad Bhāgavatam, beginning with Srinviptam Svakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Ridiyanta Shtori Bhadrani Vidunoti Sritsatam Nasta Praishva Bhadresh Nityam Bhagavata Seva Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtaki Tada Rajastamo Bhava Kami Lobadayas Chede Tarna Vedam Stitam Save Prasidati. Next one. You remember the next one? Yeah. It's 20. Remember 1 to 20? 1, 2. I have to review that chapter. I used to know it all. This Swami named, nice Gujarati gentleman, Mahavishnu Goswami, not to be confused with the British. Yeah. And then the next one is Vidyate Hridayagrantis Chidante Sarva Samshaya Shiyante Jasya Karmani Driste Vatmanisre. So these 5 verses Prabhupada quotes in that poem that he wrote when he came across on the boat. And he also quotes them in the purport to the 7th chapter, the 7th chapter, verse 1 of Bhagavad Gita. And that particular verse is the verse he spoke on more than any other verse. Prabhupada gave more lectures on 7.1. And in that purport, he puts those 5 verses. So the translation of those 5 verses, Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Parama, a super soul in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truth of the devotee, cleanses the desire from material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhāgavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as a irrevocable fact. As soon as irrevocable loving service is established in the heart, the effects of nature's modes of passion and ignorance, such as lust, desire, and hankering, disappear from the heart, and then the devotee is established in goodness and he becomes happy. And thus established in the mode of unalloyed goodness, the man whose mind has been enlivened by contact with the devotional service to the Lord gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association. Thus the knot in the heart is pierced and all misgivings are cut to pieces. The chain of fruitive actions is terminated when one sees the self as master. So that's basically a whole description of devotional service from the very beginning, how it purifies the heart and how one becomes completely fixed in transcendence. So after those 5 verses is this verse that we quoted, number 22. Certainly, therefore, since time immemorial, all transcendentalists have been rendering devotional service to Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, with great delight, because such devotional service is enlivening the self. So the karmis are trying to enliven themselves by gratifying their senses, but what happens is if that's your paradigm, attaining happiness through sense gratification, you actually encounter misery. And there's a couple of verses in that connection. One is Vishayendriya samyogad yatad agri mritopamam parname vishameva tat sukham raja samsmrita. That happiness which is born of contact between the senses and their objects, which is like nectar in the beginning and poison at the end, is said to be of the nature of passion. So this whole civilization is laboring under the misconception that by acting in the mode of passion, they'll actually become happy. And there's another nice verse which I might be able to quote. Let's say it goes, Gyanat Sattva. I don't know if I got it. It's there's 3 chapters that deal with the modes of material nature, 14, 17, 18 in Bhagavad Gita. And the result of acting in those modes is listed in this verse in the 14th chapter, number 17, which goes like this. Sattvat sanjayate jnanam. If you act in the mode of goodness, you'll attain knowledge. Rajasa loba evacha. If you act in the mode of passion, you'll attain greed. Pramada moho tamaso bhavato jnanam evacha. And if you act in the mode of ignorance, you'll develop foolishness, madness, and illusion. And and then the previous verse actually also tells more about that. Karmanasu kritasya sattvikam nirmalam palam. The result of pious action is pure as in the mode of goodness. But rajasas tu palam dukam, the result of acting in the mode of passion is misery. And ajnanatamasa palam, action performed in ignorance results in foolishness. Yeah, so that's the one I wanted. It says, rajasas tu palam dukam. By acting in the mode of passion, one attains misery. So this whole civilization is teaching people to act in the mode of passion, to endeavor for people generally in the mode of passion. They try to attain wealth, they try to attain power, they try to attain possessions, they try to attain sensual enjoyment, like sex life. All these things is happiness in the mode of passion. Everyone's thinking by doing this, they're going to become happy. But actually, according to Bhagavad Gita, if they read Bhagavad Gita, they would know they're actually going to become miserable. So the devotee has another strategy to become happy. He serves the senses of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by performing yajna. And because he satisfies Krishna, he becomes happy because he's part of Krishna. And other people become happy. It's actually easy to understand how we can be happy by serving Krishna, because Krishna has perfect knowledge and Krishna is also merciful. So the knowledge that Krishna is giving is for our benefit, because he loves us. He's giving us this perfect knowledge for our benefit. So if we act according to perfect knowledge for our benefit, we're certainly going to be a lot happier than if we act according to our own knowledge, which is definitely not perfect. So it's more reasonable to act according to the direction of someone who's omniscient and merciful than to act according to our own mental speculation. So then the jnani, he has a different strategy for attaining happiness. He's learned that he's not his body, and he's thinking that if he can merge his soul into the Supreme Soul, that will be happiness for him. So actually in the Nectar of Instruction, it's described by Rupa Goswami, there's three kinds of happiness. There's material happiness, spiritual happiness, and devotional happiness. And the happiness of Brahmananda, to realize I am Aham Brahmasmi, I'm Brahman, is intermediate happiness. So the problem with that happiness is you can't really stay in that position of thinking I am Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman, because as souls we have to be active. And if we are unaware of the option of serving the Supreme Brahman and staying on the platform of Brahman, then we'll just engage in material activities and we'll fall down from the Brahman platform. And there's this verse that Prabhupada quotes, Yene Ravanaksha Vimuktana Maninas Jayasta Bhavada Vishuddha Mudaya Arya Krishna Padam Padam Pada Pashanti. What's the last one? Remember the last one? Patyantiro. Fortunately, I always remember the numbers of the verses. So that verse is in the prayers of by the demigods to Lord Krishna in the womb. And it's the big verse that people quote when they want to say how you don't ultimately attain happiness by the path of speculation. So it's 1:2:32. And it goes, Patantyado nadrita yuzmad angraya. They fall down because they don't take shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. So basically, although they achieve the highest position and may think themselves liberated, their intelligence is impure. They fall down from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. So the idea is the soul has to be active. So if people give up all activities to attain the platform of Brahman, they can only stay in that state for so long because the tendency to be active will drive them to engage in activities. And if they're ignorant of the existence of the Supreme Lord and the activities of bhakti, then they'll just engage in ordinary activities. So just this initial knowledge that we're given, just this single statement by Lord Chaitanya, Jiverswapoi Krishna Nityadas, defeats the misunderstandings of both the karmis and the gyanis, because that says the identity of the soul is he's the eternal servant of Krishna, not that he's one with Krishna in all respects. And of course the idea that we're eternally parts of Krishna is there in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says in 15:7, Mamai vangsa jiva lokai jiva buddha sanatana manasastani indriyani prakristani karstri. The living entities are my eternal fragmental parts. So he says they're eternal parts, not that they merge in the whole and lose their identity. So just understanding this basic truth promoted by Lord Chaitanya, I'm the eternal servant of Krishna, the misconception that I'm the Lord is destroyed. And by acting according to that, we feel more and more satisfied in our real identity. As that verse is so nice. 126, the supreme occupation for all of mankind is that by which one can render loving service unto the transcendent Lord. Such service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted in order to satisfy the self. So sometimes we're feeling discontent. But according to the Bhāgavatam, there's only two reasons for being discontented. One is we have some material motivation in our devotional service, and the other is we have some interruption in our devotional service. So all we have to do to be satisfied in devotional service is to get rid of all the motivations and all the interruptions. So that can be our New Year's resolution, to root out all our motivations and all our interruptions. I felt very victorious the last day of the year, because at noon I went in Harinam, and then I went to Freeport and I gave the lecture, and then I went to Manhattan for another Harinam, and I went to Brooklyn for another Harinam. So I gave one lecture and did 3 Harinams. So hopefully I'll someday attain the perfection of no interruption in my devotional service. I studied verses on the train and chanted extra japa. So that was Prabhupada's program. Actually, is a program of unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service, and he was the emblem of that. He would say that he was always reading, writing, always something, reading, writing. He was always engaged. And his servants, when they would wake up in the middle of the night, they would see Prabhupada was engaged and wondering when he ever slept, because he was working when they went to sleep and he was working when they woke up. And there was somebody was telling me recently there was one of his servants, like I think he maybe even woke him up in the middle of the night and asked him why he was sleeping, and he said that he'd done 18 hours of service the previous day, and Prabhupada said, "Our program is 24 hours." So, of course, Rupa Goswami is famous for only having slept 2 hours. If I was on the level of Rupa Goswami, I wouldn't have had to sleep during the entire Brahma Muhurta, because I would feel that 2.5 was overboard, you know. So the idea is that the Goswamis, they derive so much bliss from their service to Radha and Krishna. Their chanting of the holy name, they're researching the Vedic literatures to find all the instructions about bhakti so they can write books to enthuse humanity. They're chanting and dancing, right? Kirtan. How's it go? There's the first verse, I think, is of the Sad Goswami Astakas, about how they engaged in chanting and dancing. They conquered over. Maybe, I wonder if I could find that. Anyone would want to find the prayers of the 6 Goswamis for me? I think it's the first one. Krishna Kirtana Nartana. It talks how they conquered over eating and sleeping by their engagement in the devotional service. Sankhya Purvaka, they counted. You know, like the actually, once when I lived in San Diego 30 years ago, I wrote my guru and I said that I finished my rounds by 10 o'clock every day. And he wrote me back and said, "You should always be like that." Raghunath Das Goswami, it said his sadhana was like lines grooved in stone. It couldn't be changed under any condition. You know? So, did you find that one? I think it's the first one. It talks how they conquered overeating and sleeping by engaging in Krishna Kirtan. Maybe not. It's one of the 8. It's not the second one, because.
Well, the first verse says that they were always engaged in chanting the holy name of Krishna and dancing. They're just like the ocean of love of God, and they are popular both with the gentle and the ruffians, because they're not envious. Do you have an idea?
Yeah. So, scroll down. It's not the second one. There's somewhere they conquered over the material condition by their practice of devotional service. Sankhya Purvakan. So Raghunath Das Goswami, who I was mentioning, he would chant 64 rounds. Okay, what's it say?
So the Goswamis were engaged in chanting the holy names of the Lord and bowing down in scheduled measurement. In this way, they utilized their valuable lives in executing these devotional activities. They conquered over eating and sleeping, and were always meek and humble, and chanted by remembering the Lord's transcendental acts.
Yeah, so Raghunath Das Goswami, who would chant 64 rounds, he would talk about Lord Chaitanya for 3 hours, he would offer obeisances 1,000 times to the deity, 2,000 times to the Vaishnavas or something. He had an incredible program. He would have a little bit of buttermilk every second day to maintain his body. So, in this way, our sadhana is different than theirs, but the idea is and we can actually invent everyone can have a schedule where they have their 24 hours and they have schedule. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he had a schedule. He would sleep from 7:30 to 10, then he would get up, and then he would write about Lord Chaitanya's teachings from 10 to 4, and then he would chant japa, and then he would read, and then he would talk with guests about important transcendental topics, and if there weren't any guests, he would continue reading, and then he would have a little breakfast and take a shower and go to work for 3 hours, and then he would come back, take a little lunch maybe, and go back and work for 3 more hours, and then yeah, I can't remember what he did after work and before he went to sleep at 7:30. But he had a schedule basically, and everything was. So we can actually gradually eliminate. It occurred to me actually, if a lot of people, Prabhupada recommended sleeping 6 or 7 hours, and more often 6. So it occurred to me, suppose I sleep 6 hours today, and tomorrow I sleep 5 hours and 59 minutes, and the next day I sleep 5 hours and 58 minutes. After 360 days or 1 year, I would have eliminated sleep altogether. Of course, unfortunately, I'm not very regulated in my sleep, so I haven't been able to experiment with this. But you could see that you could very slowly. The trick is, the mind is very much conditioned, so it's hard to make dramatic changes, but it's easy to make little changes. So you could even if you just slept, 5 minutes less a month, let's say. If you sleep 5 minutes less a month, then every year you sleep an hour less. Right? So you could try that as an experiment, and then with that extra 5 minutes, you replace it by 5 minutes of japa, or 5 minutes of kirtan, or 5 minutes of Bhāgavatam, or 5 minutes of deity service. Whatever hits your life, you can choose your favorite devotional service. And you can be the next Goswami. We should end here so there's time for questions. Yes, Ryan. Oh, really? Okay. Well, just tell the parts that I missed. Could you tell the parts I missed?
8 p.m. to 10 p.m. you would sleep.
Right.
2 hours. You would write from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. Then 4 a.m. to 4:30 you would take a nap.
Oh, okay. Forgot that.
4 a.m. to 7 you would chant japa. 7 a.m. to 7:30 you would do correspondence. 7:30 to 9:30 you would study the shastras. 9:30 to 10 you would take a bath and his prasadam, which was half a liter of milk, fruit, and 2 chapatis. 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. you would have his court duties. 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. you would refresh at home. 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. more court duties. 5 to 7 you would translate Sanskrit shastras into Bengali.
Oh, okay.
7 p.m. to 8 p.m. you would bath and prasadam. So his daily schedule, you sleep 3 hours, write 8.5 hours, do japa and study the shastras for 5.5 hours, and work for 6 hours.
I've never really seen it totaled up like that. Maybe you could send that to me. Yeah. So that's the idea. We try to fully engage in Krishna's service, so there's no opportunity for Maya. It's said where Krishna's like the sun and Maya is like darkness. Where there is sunlight, there's no darkness. Where there's Krishna, there's no Maya. So it's 9 o'clock. We've managed to fill up the whole hour with Krishna Katha by the grace of the Lord and His devotees. Thank you for your kind attention. His divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Srila Prabhupada Ki. In one sense, I'm glad I didn't have to worry about studying for that class, I have a lot more time to do other things. I have to study for tonight's class.